Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Magic Duels. We're here with the subscriber submitted Grixis Control deck submitted by Hazankoh. And on a side note, I'd like to thank you guys for last episode. The support was, wow, nice, very nice, and a lot of people, a lot of you really wanted to express your sentiments, and thank you for that. That said, let's get into it, and let's see what his deck is all about. And you can submit your deck in any way via the comments or any of my social media links in the description if you wish. So, how do we run this control deck? Well, apparently it just seems like a classic destroy everything, draw everything, and then eventually win the game sort of thing. So, let's take a look at it. First card, I'm not sure about the 3 count, but Galvanic Bombardment for 1 red is an instant. Galvanic Bombardment deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is 2 plus the number of Galvanic Bombardment cards in your graveyard. That's kind of why I'm wondering about this. I'm sure he's got his reasonings for all these things, and he'll let me know about certain cards and whatnot. So I don't know if this was just a last-minute cut or what, but we're gonna go with it for now. That's fine. We're gonna play around with it. Next up is Jace Vern's Prodigy for 0/2 for 2 mana is a 0/2. I got that reversed, and you can tap to draw a card, then discard a card if there are 5 or more cards in your graveyard. When that happens, flip them into Jace Telepath Unbound, where +1 shrinks a creature for a little bit of board stalling. -3 allows us to flashback a spell from our graveyard, whatever we might need, maybe removal, or maybe we just need to refill our hand. Doesn't matter. And the -9 with an effect like the -3 coming in, it's probably not going to happen too much. You get an emblem where whenever you cast a spell, you mill your opponent for 5. So yeah, that's one way of really getting the value out of the deck. That's for sure. I don't know the whole construction of the deck. I've played a few games with it to kind of get a feel for how it's going, and I played the video, so you'll see the video, but I don't know exactly how every last little thing's supposed to interact. I just know that the flashback is probably the valuable thing, and then the stalling, of course, as well, is quite useful. Next up is Brawl, Chief of Compliance for 2 mana is a 1/3 legend, and instant sorceries you cast cost 1 last to cast. And whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So the looting effect with the counterspells is very nice, and also your counterspells being 2 mana and all your spells being much less to cast is also pretty good. Whether or not he's a turn 2 play is, I suppose you can feel it out at the very beginning of a game if you're so inclined. Like if you see red, you may not want to put him down, sort of thing. But other than that, yeah, definitely good for making mana curve a little simpler and much easier to run. Next up is Telling Time for 2 mana instant, and you get to look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, 1 on the top of your library, and 1 on the bottom of your library. So definitely good at making sure your draws are a little bit smoother and you're getting what you need mostly when you need it. Harness Lightning is next one for 2 mana as an instant. Choose target creature, you get 3 energy counters, then you may pay any amount of energy, and Harness Lightning deals that much damage to that creature. Interesting game I played with it. It wasn't in the videos, it was my trial run through the deck, and I had enough energy to destroy a Desolation Twin. But he cast the Desolation Twin, and the cast trigger I couldn't stop. I countered the twin, but he got the 10/10, and well, I just Harness Lightning him for 10. So there is a lot of potential with this card, whether it's just early game or just a simple late game destroy everything. Next up is 4 copies of Take Inventory for 2 mana, sorcery, draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of cards named Take Inventory in your graveyard. So with that, we can note the looting effects with Jace and Baral. in case we have none in our graveyard, then we can have this as kind of an expendable thing to throw in the graveyard and power up the rest of them. Anyways, next up, Dynavolt Tower. For 3 mana is an artifact. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get 2 energy counters. And then you can tap and pay 5 energy. Dynavolt Tower deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So, it's meant in this deck to simply control the board. Try and keep most of those things off of it. By just countering what you can, destroying what you can, and then having Dynavolt Tower cover your weaknesses where you can't, where they're overwhelming you. And then next up is one of our counter spells, and Scatter the Winds, an instant to counter target spell, and Awaken 3 for 6 mana. If we cast it for 6 mana, we get to put 3 counters on a target land we control, and it becomes a 0/0. With haste, so gives us a 3/3 land anyways, blocker or attacker, however the game board is going at that point in time, so definitely good. And next up is the next counter spell, Broken Concentration. For 3 mana, counter target spell. Also has a madness of 4. That's not going to be truly relevant. The rare situation is usually with Jace Vern's Prodigy, when you run the loot and then you can counter for a 4. Great if you don't have your double blue yet, or just the fact that you want to make sure that you're replacing your card instantly with Jace. Next up is 2 copies of Unlicensed Disintegration. There's not a lot of artifacts in this deck, and so I can see why there's not a lot, but I mean, it's an easy removal spell to cast for a black and a red and colorless. Instant, destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, Unlicensed Disintegration deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. So, yep, creature removal, and a little easier to cast than Murder, for example, requiring the double black. So that's pretty relevant. Next up is Liliana Last Hope, which also has the same cost as Murder, oddly. And Planeswalker for 3 loyalty, and the +1 up to 1 target creature gets -2/-1 till end of turn, gets rid of tokens and so on like that, or small creatures, or simply stalls just like Jace does. -2, you get to look at the top, or put the top 2 cards of your library in your graveyard, then you can pull a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So there's a bit of graveyard recursion if you feel it's necessary. Never know what's in there. You play it by ear each game. There's a few creatures in the deck, and you may want them back. Some of them are rather relevant, so there you go. And the -7 is you get an emblem with the beginning of your end step. Put X/2/2 black zombie creature tokens on the battlefield, where X is 2 plus the number of zombies you control. So you get to ultimate her, and she instantly, at the end of turn, that's not quite instantly, creates 2 zombie tokens to protect you, and then it just keeps compounding for each one that happens to survive. And then it turns from your defense to your win condition. Anyways, next up is our next counter spells, an Insidious Will. For 4 mana. You get to choose 1 counter target spell, or you may choose new targets for target spell, or copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So we can splice off. I mean, if we get into ridiculous range, we can splice off Glimmer. Hennies, you get the idea for copying. Or we may choose new targets. Say they throw something like an Anguished Unmaking at like one of our Planeswalkers. Then we can retarget it on something that they're controlling, and they can just wipe out their own stuff and nuke themselves, for example. As just an example, anyway. Or just a flat-out counter spell if we want to get rid of something really silly. Next up, 3 copies of Glimmer of Genius. For 4 mana, you get to scry 2, draw 2 cards, and you get 2 energy at instant speed. So that's just simple. You get to go 4 cards deep if you wish, and get the best, or what you feel is what you need at the time. And, you know, start refilling your hand. So definitely good. Card advantage is always good, especially in control. So, yep, I'm okay with that. Next up is the board wipe in Yahenni's Expertise for 4 mana. Is a sorcery. All creatures get -3/-3 till end of turn, and you may cast a card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost, which is also relevant for certain spells that you may not have the color for. Say you're not drawing into your red, or strangely enough, even not drawing into your blue. I mean, or there's all kinds of things. Yahenni's Expertise followed by Unlicensed for that one thing that's bigger than Yahenni's Expertise can handle. There's all kinds of options there, and it definitely helps get everything off the board that's annoying you. Next up is Dark Intimations for all the colors of the deck, +2. Is a sorcery. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, then discards a card. And then you return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand, and then draw a card. And then the second part's irrelevant for now, because it doesn't exist in this format quite yet. So, with that said, that is good at getting rid of opponents' planeswalkers or returning yours. And again, card advantage. They discard a card and you draw a card. So if they're holding up that one card, say Pump Spell, or really bad removal spell, you feel they're holding it up, then you can get it out of their hand. So you don't maybe you want it as a discard and draw and get something out of your graveyard. Maybe they don't have a target, but it's definitely targeting for tons of card advantage. You kill 2 of theirs or up to 2 of theirs, and you can get up to 2 back, so definitely worth it. Next up is Jace Unraveler Secrets for 5 mana. Is a 5 loyalty planeswalker. +1, can scry 1 and draw a card. Very useful at getting exactly what you need. Maybe you are good on lands and you just want to bottom them. Well, it gets them out of the way for you. Or maybe you need more lands and you want to target them and you're just kind of drawing into stuff that you don't need at the moment. Definitely helpful for that, and the card advantage is real on it, so there's that. -2, you can return target creature to its owner's hand. With ETB effects, more relevant all the time. It's harder to say if that's a useful ability versus just being able to draw a card and drawing into the answer. And the -8, if we get there, it's pretty cool and very relevant to the deck. You get an emblem with whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, counter that spell. So it'll do a lot of the legwork for us, and it'll leave us so that we can have a counter spell, and it's probably going to get rid of whatever plan where they're saving up for it. Next up is Nixilis Reignited for 5 mana. Is a 5 loyalty planeswalker, and its +1 is you draw a card and lose 1 life. So again, just card advantage, although you may run into the situation where you can't always run that. But its most common first ability to make sure that it stays out there, -3, is destroy target creature. And it's -8 if you get there as well. Target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So this is a very nice indirect win condition as well. So that if you can't win through creatures, say Turbo Fog, then this will allow you to get there. Next up is Torrential Gearhulk for 6 mana. It's a 5/6 with Flash. And when Torrential Gearhulk enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card would be put in the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So, definitely a good way to get your counters running, or your glimmers, or what have you, and have a 5/6 on the board to ambush whatever might come up. So definitely pretty good for that, and can tempo swing the game well in your favor, and is often a win condition on its own with the removal and counter backup with it. And then last non-land card is Chandra Flamecaller for 6 mana. Is a 4 loyalty planeswalker with its +1, putting 2/3/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste onto the battlefield, and you exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So that's 6 damage every turn if it's uncontested, which will win a game all on its own. Zero ability, it's hard to say if it's going to be useful. We might end up with dead cards towards particular matchup. So discard all cards in your hand, then draw that many cards plus one. So it's pretty good for that if we're running into dead cards versus a certain matchup. Say creatureless deck and all we've got left is removal in our hand, for example. And then its minus X is the board wipe. Chandra Flamecaller deals X damage to each creature. So on the play, the moment you play her, 4 damage to each creature. Can be a board wipe versus aggro-ish or go wide decks very nicely and get the game back in your favor, and usually is a huge tempo swing versus those type of decks. If you can last till turn 6, that is, of course. Alright, so the lands, 3 islands, 3 swamps, 3 mountains. Okay, so spread evenly across there. We've got 2 Wandering Fumaroles, 1 Smoldering Marsh. Blue is the main color, so you can see where that's relevant. 1 Westvale Abbey. I'm not sure the reasoning for Westvale Abbey in the deck quite yet. I'm sure that that will be made clear to me at some point throughout these videos. Because there's just not enough creatures. It does make tokens, yes, but I don't feel it does much more than that versus just simply having colored mana there. So I'm having my questions here, of course, and that would be one of the other cards that I'm not sure about. Anyways, move on. Drowned Catacomb for blue and black, and 2 Sulphur Falls for red and blue, and 2 Dragon Skull Summer for red and blue, and 4 Evolving Wilds for whatever we may need. Also, he mentioned one change he wasn't sure about was Liliana swapped out for Tezzeret, and I can understand the reasoning. Liliana is a win condition, but her board control is a little lessened versus Tezzeret. Tezzeret's mana acceleration and board control based on the artifacts, and the board control can exceed Liliana's in ways when you start getting more artifacts. So there is that, and it's an understandable switch. Also, the fact that she's double color does make her harder to cast in this. Tezzeret seems a little bit easier. By turn 4, I usually see myself with enough mana for that, so there is that. One other thing was, I noticed by the end of the gameplay video that I was having issues with mana. It was just not coming as fast as I feel it should. So at 23 lands, I don't think... Yeah, I don't think that 23 lands is quite appropriate for this kind of deck. So I'm thinking of bumping it up. I'm going to scan it over, so don't take this deck tech as be-all, end-all. And go feel free to leave your suggestions in the comments. I'm sure I'm not going to be the only person commenting on what they feel might fit into the deck. So we'll have a nice, wonderful discussion about what works, what doesn't, or how what you put in might actually change around a few things in the long run. So, with that said, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.